For the first 5 to 7 years of my football journey, I used to rely on motivation to train consistently. It would work for 2 weeks, and then after that, I would run out of motivation and I wouldn't train anymore. But after playing football for over 11 years and playing across 4 different countries, I have come to the realization that motivation and willpower is not exactly the way to go. I've learned that the only way to stay consistent is to stop choosing to train and to actually make it automatic. Now I train 2 to 3 times a day while posting 2 videos a week, editing everything myself, and I don't really need any motivation or willpower to do it. It's just automatic for me. So today I'm sharing 3 tips that has helped make training automatic for me because once you remove the decision, everything just gets easier. Now, the first lesson that completely changed everything for me is also one that most players overlook, and it's probably why you're struggling to train consistently. Right now, if you want to take football seriously, you probably have a lot of goals that you have set for yourself. You want to be able to do ball work every single day. You want to be able to work on your speed 2 to 3 times a week. You want to do fitness on the weekends. You have all these goals set up for yourself. And for the first week, it probably works really well for you too. You're motivated, you're getting everything done, your week goes exactly as you planned it. But then all of a sudden, in week 2, your teacher announces a surprise test, and now you have extra homework assigned to you. So you put your football training aside because you have all this work that you need to get done. And before you know it, it's been 5 days and you haven't even touched the football. Now, the problem here isn't you, it's actually your setup. You have set yourself up so that the plan only works when the stars align. You never asked yourself, what if I have a surprise test next week? What if the teacher assigns us a new group project? What if we have more homework to do? You just assumed that everything will work out in your favor. Now, the better way to do this would have been to assume that your plan would have failed. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but assuming that your plan will fail gives you the best possible chance to make it a reality. What if it rains? What if you have extra homework? What if school finishes late? Write down every single obstacle that you can think of and ask yourself, has this ever prevented me from achieving my goals? Once you have done this, now instead you have to plan for your worst day. Think of the worst possible day you can imagine. Maybe it's raining, maybe you got home late, you're exhausted, you've got a ton of homework. And then ask yourself, how would I train on that day? How long would I train? When exactly will I train on a day like that? And if your answer is, I probably wouldn't train, then you have to change your plan. Because your plan has to work even on the days that you don't feel like training. It has to set you up for repeatability. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure once again. So, right now, you have identified all your obstacles and you have planned for your worst day. But how do you figure out what actually works? Well, this is also the part where most people give up because they're too lazy to try. So here's what you're going to do. Say you need to fit in ball work into your day. The first question to ask yourself is, when can you actually do the ball work? Say you come up with an idea of doing ball work during lunch in school, but then you realize that during lunch you don't actually have access to the field. So then you figure out, okay, maybe I'll do ball work in the morning instead. But then you realize that if you want to do it in the morning, you have to get up earlier in the morning, and you can't really do that because you're staying up late at night to finish your homework. But then, can you actually do your homework during your lunch break or when you're waiting for your teacher to come in class? It seems like a long process, and there are lots of questions to be answered. But you have to see this as a series of problems that need to be solved. Just because the first solution doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that there isn't a solution out there. You just have to find a combination of solutions that will work for you, and your job is to figure out what combination will actually go with your day to day routine. You're just going to constantly bounce back and forth between a solution and an obstacle that might come in the way of that solution. And then once you've landed on something that can actually work, you're going to stick with that. And the more you do this, the better you get at it. Now, once you figure out a system that works, there is one thing that you have to prepare yourself for. When you first start structuring your days to fit everything in, it is going to suck. You're going to have to finish your homework during lunch instead of chatting with your friends. You're going to have to go to bed at 10 p.m. instead of midnight. You're going to have to wake up earlier than you're used to. And you would think to yourself, this sucks. This does not feel like freedom. This feels restrictive. And for a while, you will consider going back to your old ways. But then you would realize something. Yes, it is uncomfortable to make all these changes. But do you know what's even more uncomfortable? The feeling you have every single night when you look back at your day and you realize that you haven't made a single amount of progress in the direction that you want to go in. The disappointment of looking back on the year and realizing that you are exactly where you were when you started off the year. Building a system that works will be uncomfortable at first because change is always uncomfortable. We like to live in our cocoons, and when something forces us to change, we hate it and our body repels in every way possible. But you're not incapable of change, you're just unfamiliar to change. Being uncomfortable is good because it means that you're doing something different. And doing something different is the only way to guarantee a different result. And when your new system feels too difficult or too uncomfortable and your body starts repelling it, just remind yourself that you are trading short term comfort for long term progress. Now, if you want progress for years on end, you need to become the system. You need to stop seeing yourself as someone who wants to be a footballer, and you need to see yourself as someone who is already a professional footballer. Because pro athletes don't see training as something they have to force themselves to do. It is part of their identity. They can't see themselves not training. And once you make that identity shift, you don't need willpower anymore. You don't need motivation anymore. The work just comes to you. And if you want to explore this identity shift in more detail, then check it out here. Thank you for watching. I hope you've gained something valuable from this video.